So we are going to do our next math lesson. And this time we have a lot of problems to do. They're quick, short ones. So we're going to fold into 16 squares. So we're going to do 3 hamburgers. And then we're going to be sneaky and we're going to do another hamburger. So we're going to do 4 folds and that will give us 16 squares. Okay. Now I'm going to go ahead and write my name in the corner. And this is lesson 7.3. And let's see, lesson 7.3, we're going to do pages 24 through 27. All right. And what we're going to do is we'll start out, there's a lot of little short, quick problems. And then we're going to add, there's some that are a little bit longer. Okay. So this lesson is about comparing decimals. And one of the things that I do to compare decimals is I line them up. And it makes comparing them pretty easy. So words that we're going to work on in this chapter are more than, less than, greater than, least, greatest, and order. Order just means putting something in order. So if we look at this particular decimal, we're looking to see what is 1/10 more than 6/10. So if I had 10 squares and I shaded 6 out of the 10, and then I added one more to that, that would give me 7/10, right? Also, you could use a number line to do that. Here's 6/10. We add one more and it's 7/10. So you could either use a number line or you could draw it. I'm going to move my keyboard here for a second. And then we also have what is 1/10 less than 1 6/10. So if I have one whole rod and 6, and then I take one away from that, that's going to leave me with 1 5/10. Okay. So another way to do that is to just add and subtract them if you don't need to draw the pictures or draw a number line. Okay, so let's also look over here. It says find out what is 100th more or 100th less than. So here they have a little model showing 100. And if we take 100 away from 22 hundredths, we get, or we add one more, 100th more, we get 23 hundredths. If we have 18 hundredths and we take away one, we get 17 hundredths. Okay, so we're going to do these guys. They're pretty quick. And we're probably going to line them up and just add and subtract them because I think that's the easiest way to do them. Okay, so we're going to look at number 1. And number 1 says, what number is 1/10 more than 1 2/10? So if I'm adding 1/10 more, I want to make sure I'm lining up the decimal, right? So you always want to make sure that the decimal points line up when you do that. So that's going to be 1 3/10, right? If I have 1/10 more, it's 1 3/10. Let's look at number 2. What is 1/10 less than 9/10? So if I have 9/10 and I have 1/10 less, then I have 8/10, right? So always lining up the decimals. That's one of the key things when you're comparing decimals, is making sure that they're lined up. All right, let's look at number 3. Number 3 says 2/10 more than 8 7/10. So again, we've lined this up and we end up with 8 9/10, right, as our answer. Okay, let's look at number 4. Number 4 says 5/10 less than 4 9/10. Less than means we're going to be subtracting. So again, we're always lining up these decimals. And so if I subtract, I'm going to get 4 4/10. Okay. Let's look at number 5. Now we're in hundredths territory. So we have 15 hundredths. It says, what number is 100th more than 15 hundredths? More means adding. So we're going to get 16 hundredths as our answer. Make these decimal points nice and big. Okay, let's look at number 6. What number is 100th less than 29 hundredths? So if we have 29 hundredths and we're looking for 100th less, it's going to look like that. Here's my decimal. So we subtract 9 minus 1, 2 minus 0, and we get 28 hundredths. Okay. So far, so good. Not too difficult. The most important thing when you're doing this kind of thing, when you're comparing and when you're adding and subtracting, is that you always want to line up the decimal point. You won't always have perfect even numbers. Like you might have a 1 here instead of the 0 and nothing here. And so you have to make sure that you accurately line up the decimal points. Number 7 has 6 24 hundredths. And it says 2 hundredths more. So we're adding 2 hundredths more. Again, we're lining up and we end up with 6 26 hundredths. Okay, and now we're zipping on over to the last one on this page, which is number 8. And it says we want 7 16 hundredths and we want 4 hundredths less. So again, we're lining up the decimal points. 6 minus 4 is 2. 1 minus 0 is 1. 7 minus 0 is 7. So we get 7 12 hundredths. I learned to do this in summer school. I really struggled with math. I have dyslexia for numbers. I see numbers backwards. I can't remember numbers. I really struggle with numbers. And so I went to summer school several summers to help me with my math. And one of my teachers showed me to do this. And so I still do it. Even now that I'm an adult, I automatically put the little arrow to make sure that I have lined them up. So I recommend that as a strategy for you, especially if you're a sloppy worker. It helps to make sure that they're lined up when you're not using graph paper and it's hard to line them up. Okay, we're on page 26. And we have the number patterns. Okay, so we're going to look in the book. It's going to talk about number patterns. So you can find missing numbers in a pattern by looking at the relationship between the numbers. These decimals follow a pattern. What are the next two decimals? 2 tenths, 4 tenths, 6 tenths, 8 tenths. This is 10 tenths or 1 whole. So the next number is going to be 1 2 tenths is 2 tenths more than 1 whole, right? 1 4 tenths is 2 tenths more than 1 2 tenths. The next two decimals are 1 2 tenths and 1 4 tenths. Okay, and she's thinking in her head, she's thinking, hey, we're just skip counting by 2 tenths each time. So we add 2/10 to get the next number. This dude right here is looking at a pattern that gets smaller, right? So he's subtracting 1 and 32 hundredths, 1 and 27 hundredths, 1 and 22 hundredths, 1 and 17 hundredths, 1 and 12 hundredths. He's seeing the relationship between the numbers. He's subtracting by 5 hundredths each time. So the next two are going to be 1 and 7 hundredths and 1 and 2 hundredths. Okay? So we're going to find the missing numbers in the pattern. Okay, and I'm not sure that doing a number line is really as helpful as they think it is. So I'm going to skip drawing the number line. We're just going to look at the relationships between the numbers, okay? Because I think that makes a little bit more sense. So I'm going to come down here and I'm going to start using these pages, this over here, okay? So let's say that I'm on 9 and 10. So number 9 is giving me 1 and 6/10. The next number is 1 and 9/10. The next number is 2 and 2/10. The next number is 2 and 5/10. And then I'm going to find 2 green boxes after that. And I'm just putting lines between them so it doesn't look like a big snarly mess, right? I want to separate them so that you can really see what we're doing. So if I have 6 and 9, I'm thinking of the relationship between 6 and 9. And that's probably going to be plus 3/10, right? Then let's see, if I add 3/10 to this, 9 plus 3 is 12, and that's going to regroup. So the relationship between this one looks like plus 3/10. The relationship between this one looks like plus 3/10. So I think it's safe to say that that's our pattern. Now, if I add 3/10 to this, I get 2.8, right? 2 and 8/10. If I add 3 to this, I'm going to get 11, which means I'm going to regroup and it's going to give me 3.1, right? Because I'm regrouping. Okay, let's look at number 10. Number 10 looks a little bit harder. So we're going backwards, I can tell already, because I have 1 and 13 hundredths, 1 and 10 hundredths, then I have 1 and 7 hundredths, then I have a green box, then I have 1 and 100th, and then I have a green box. So they're being kind of sneaky and throwing the green boxes in the middle. I like that. Okay. So if I'm looking at the relationship between these numbers, this is 13 hundredths, this is 10. This looks to me like I'm subtracting 3 hundredths, so it's 0.03, so that I get 10 here. Then I'm subtracting 3 again to get 7. So if I subtract 3 from 7, I get 1.04, right? If I subtract 3 from that, I get 1.01. And now I have to subtract 3 from that. And I'm going to actually, that's a little bit of a face melter. So I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to just actually subtract it, because we're going to have to regroup here. So let's just write it out. Let's take 0.03 away from that and regroup. So that's going to give us, we can't take 3 from 1, so we're going to have to regroup over here. and that's going to give us a 9, and that's going to be 8, and this is going to be 0, and this is going to be 9. So now we're going to have 98 hundredths, right? And that makes sense. If we added 3 to that, it would kick us, we'd have to regroup, and it would kick us up there into 1 and 100ths. Okay? So we're just looking at relationships between numbers to see the pattern. All right, now it's asking us to show the problems on the number line. And I really, in your math book, and I really think that's a little bit frustrating. So I think we should just do it like we did these guys right here, and just go ahead and add and subtract, because I think that's going to be easier. Okay, so let's do number 1 on page 27. We have 1/10 more than 3 2/10. So again, we add that up and we get 3 3/10. Okay, pretty easy. Let's look at number 2. We get 3 8/10, and we're taking 1/10 less than. So if we go ahead and subtract it, we get 3 7/10. Okay. I'm going to write out 3 and 4. And you guys can do them, and then we'll check our work. So this one says it's 2 9/10, and it's more than. So we're adding. And this one, number 4, is less than. So we're subtracting. I'll draw the little arrows in for you. Okay. See what you get as your answer, and then we'll see if yours matches mine. All right. I got 9 minus 2 is 7, and 2 minus 0 is 2. On this one, I had to regroup, and I got 2 9/10 on that one. Okay. Let's look at number 5. Number 5 is more than, so we're adding, and we have 55 hundredths, and we're adding 100th. Okay, and when we add those together, we get 56 hundredths. Pretty easy. Number 6. This time we're subtracting. We have 64 hundredths, and we're subtracting 100th from that. So when we subtract, we do 4 minus 1, 6 minus 0. So we get 63 hundredths. Okay, let's look at number 7. Number 7 is 2 hundredths more than 68 hundredths. Okay, go ahead and try number 7, and I'm going to write number 8. Go ahead and, ooh, number 8, they're trying to trick you. Dun, dun, dun. Let's see if you can figure out what to do on number 8. Ha, ha, ha. I'll give you a couple of seconds. Okay, so on this one I added 8 plus 2. I regrouped, And that made it into 200ths more, make 68 hundredths into 70 hundredths. Now, if ever this happens to you and you've got nothing over here, I like to put an invisible 0 in there because it looks weird to have nothing above there. And again, we're lining up the decimals. This is another reason why we line up the decimals. If you didn't line them up and you moved the 6 over, you would get the wrong answer, right? If you moved the 6 over to the hundredths place and you just subtracted without worrying about lining up the decimals, you would get a crazy answer. So this is 6/10, and I just made it into 60 hundredths by adding a 0. So now I can subtract it. I can subtract 3 hundredths from 60 hundredths. So I have to regroup. And I end up getting 57 hundredths when I do that. If I messed up and I said, I went like this and I subtracted the 3 from there, right? If I went like this and subtracted it, I would get, that would be 3/10, and that's not even close to being the right answer. So you have to make sure that you line the decimals up when you're stacking them, so that in case you're subtracting 100th from a 10th, it makes sense and you get the correct answer. Okay. We have gone all the way to 8. Now there's a chart, and we're just going to make the chart on our paper. So it says find the missing numbers. So I'm just going to use all this extra room that I left for myself. And my chart has to have 3 spaces. 1, 2, 3. And then it has to have 3 going this way. 1, 2, 3. And actually, I probably need to put this up here. Okay. So this says this is going to be 9, 10, and 11. And this says number. This has 19 hundredths. This has 1 73 hundredths. And this has 3 9/10, right? And remember, do not be afraid to put a fake 0 there, a little imaginary 0, should you need it. Because I have a sneaking suspicion we're going to need that. This column, we're going to do 1/10 more. This one, we're going to do 1/100th more. Okay, so we're just going to add. That means plus, right? More means plus. If I say, give me more cereal, you give me plus cereal. You don't take it away from me unless I don't say please, and then you might. So I'm going to take my 0, 19 hundredths, and I'm going to line up the decimals, and I'm going to add 0.1. Now, this looks funky, doesn't it? Because I've lined these up, but I'm going to put a little invisible 0 there. So I'm going to get 29 tenths, right? 19 hundredths plus 10 more is going to be 29 hundredths. Okay. Now, if I take this one and I have 19 hundredths and I'm adding 1/100th more and I've lined them up, I'm going to end up with 20 hundredths. Right? Okay, let's look at the next one. Now I have 1 73 hundredths, and I'm adding 0.1. And again, I can add this little invisible 0 there to hold my place. These guys line up right here. This is going to be 3, this is going to be 8, and that's going to be 1. So 1/10 more is going to give me 1 83 hundredths. Now I'm going to do the next one. 1 73 hundredths plus 100th. That's going to give me 1 74 hundredths, right? That's pretty easy. I'm just adding one more to it. Now this guy's going to be, you might need to use this little friendly invisible ghost 0, right? So if I have 3 9/10, and I'm adding this, then I don't need the invisible 0, right? I've lined these up. I get 4, whole number 4. Now I'm going to use my invisible 0 because I'm adding 0.01, right? Because I'm lining these up. These decimals have to line up. So I get 3 91 hundredths. Okay, so the trick with comparing decimals is that you always want to stack, you always want to line up the decimals. When you're trying to see if something's greater than or less than, and you're comparing them, you're not adding them, you're just saying which one's bigger and which one's smaller. Same thing. You always want to line up the decimals when you're doing that. Okay, so I hope this helped you. And thanks for joining me. And I will talk to you later.